The function of a home office is essentially to turn a portion, a fixed, dedicated portion of your non-deductible personal home into a deductible place of work. Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for creative people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, tax pro, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're an artist, designer, or creative entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your own time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello. Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. I am so excited you're with me today. If you've been listening, you know I've been asking you to tell me what things you feel confused about. So to give me ideas for what to talk about here on the Sunlight Podcast to help you. And a lot of listener questions came in about the home office deduction for good reason, because it can feel kind of complicated. So today on the Sunlight Podcast, we're going to talk about the home office or home studio. All right, let's jump in. So the IRS rules are very, very clear about home office use. And when I say, small programming note, anytime I say home office, I just want you to know if you call your place of work a studio instead of an office, home studio, home office, they're interchangeable. It's the same thing. So if you are taking a home office deduction, the IRS requirement is very clear that it has to be exclusive and regular use. So what does that mean? Well, to take a home office deduction, it's very important that the place that you use, that you call your office, has to be used only as your office and not as anything else. In other words, if you like to do your work at the dining room table every day, that's not a home office and you do not get to take a deduction for that. Okay, very important. So this cannot be a multi-purpose room. This cannot be your guest bedroom. This cannot be your dining room, your kitchen. That does not count as a home office. So what is very important to know is it must be exclusive use. Now, there are a lot of you out there who are like, but I genuinely set up an office in this corner of this one room, right? Or I often work with people living in cities who live in loft style apartments, and you might only have one room in the house, right? You could not dedicate your entire living space to your home studio. So I will tell you, you are allowed to subdivide a room, right? Or if you live in a loft, subdivide a little portion of your home studio or home office space. So what does that mean? You should actually make a clear boundary. It can be subtle. You don't have to hire a contractor and put up a new wall or anything. But what you should do is have a row of bookshelves and your home office goes to that row of bookshelves, or put a little piece of tape on the floor or a curtain, maybe some kind of delineation that says, this square area of this, this subset of this larger room is my office, my dedicated and exclusive office space. I recently also had a listener ask me if it was okay to take her home office if she's only in there 10 to 15 hours a week. And yes, that is totally fine because that's still regular use. Now, of course, if you're using it 1 hour per month, that's not really going to hold up with the IRS. So I would not try to do that. It shouldn't be that rare that you're in there, but 10 to 15 hours a week, absolutely. That definitely counts. That is regular use for sure. So the other thing is that this space, this home office space that you're using, it needs to be your principal place of business. Okay. So it is important that you're not taking deductions or a whole bunch of other places that you do your work. If you're going to take a home office, home studio deduction, that home office does need to be the primary place that you do your work. Okay. If you are not listening to this as a podcast, but watching the YouTube video version, you're going to see that where I am sitting right now, this is my home office. That would be pretty clear. It's actually quite big. So you can see my exclusive use home office as if you're watching this on YouTube, and you'll see that every single time I record, I'm in this same spot. So I'm definitely using it regularly. So Let's talk about the basic function of, first of all, what it means to have a home office, and then using that information, how you're actually going to do the calculation. Okay. So it's your principal place of business, except there is one exception for this. And that is if you have work that is outside the home, but you do not have a space in that place for the administrative functions of the business, then you are allowed to take a home office expense in addition to the other space. So I'm going to give an example of a real life friend that I have here in Asheville, my friend Jessie, who owns the Asheville Tea Company. So she has a manufacturing space, right, where they assemble the tea bags and they package the product. Now, I don't actually know if Jessie does or does not have an admin space within that manufacturing plant, but it is possible she doesn't, right? So in that case, if she just has like a factory room, but she does the administrative office work at her house in a home office, then Jessie would be allowed to take a home office deduction on top of obviously being able to deduct the manufacturing space. All right, so that is one exception to that principal place of business. Now, let's talk about what the general theory is behind the home office and using that information, how you're going to make the calculation. So essentially, what you need to know is that your home is a personal expense. Your home is not meant to be deductible. Never is, never was. Okay. Except for occasional little things like mortgage interest, basically, because we have a big real estate lobby in this country. Sorry, small side note. So it's a personal expense. You're living and you're not allowed to deduct it. However, the function of a home office is essentially to turn a portion, a fixed, dedicated portion of your non-deductible personal home into a deductible place of work. Okay. This is why the exclusive use part is important. But what it does is it creates a deductible office place of business inside your home itself. So using that logic, it's going to actually make a lot of sense to you how we do the calculation. So here it goes. Basically, to do the home office deduction, you're going to need to get square footage for two different areas. Number one, you need the entire square footage of your living space. Generally, this is something you can find on either the, rental listing for if you're a renter, or on, the documents when you bought the home, right? You're generally the square footage of the house is a known quantity, and somebody probably listed it in a real estate document. So you probably don't have to go out with a tape measure and measure your home. However, if you need to, you can do it that way too. That's fine. Second, you're going to need the square footage of your actual office. Okay. So that you probably do need a tape measure for, right? It's not that hard. Just get out your tape measure and you're just measuring length by width. If you want to make it a little more complicated because there's ins and outs to your house, to your office, you've got little alcoves or cutouts, you can do a more complicated calculation, and that's completely fine. So what you're going to get when you have these two numbers is you get a ratio. You are going to put your home office square footage above your full house square footage, and that gives you a ratio. So let's just say that I have an apartment that I rent and it's 1,000 square feet. And let's just say there's 4 equal rooms, and one of those rooms is my exclusive and regularly used home office. And that is 250 square feet. So that gives me a ratio of 250 to 1,000. That also divides down to 1 to 4. Right? So 1/4 of my living space is a deductible home office. Okay. So now basically what I get to do is take all the expenses that get applied to my entire living space. So for me as a renter, that would be my rent, my renter's insurance, and my utilities. Okay. And I might have some other expenses that apply to the entire area as well. So if you have those can get included as well. And you are going to get to take 1/4 of your rent, 1/4 of your utilities, 1/4 of your renter's insurance, et cetera, as a deduction for your home office or studio. Okay. Now, those expenses are called indirect expenses. And the reason that they're indirect is they're just proportional to the larger and generally non-deductible personal expense of your living space. But that is the portion of those general expenses that are deductible. as your home office. Okay. Now, you also get to take deductions for direct expenses. Now, what's a direct expense? Direct expense is what it sounds like, is something that you pay for that is only for your studio, for your office. Okay. So I'm sitting in my home office right now. If I decide that it's a gloomy color and it would make me feel better to, paint it bright yellow, and I hired some painters to come in and paint my office bright yellow, that would be a direct expense only spent on my office itself. So that full 100% of that painting job would be deductible on my home office expense. Likewise, if I'm a painter and I set up really, really nice lighting, everybody knows painters need good light. So if I set up great lighting in my studio, then that lighting itself is only for the studio. And so that is going to get to be a direct expense, not taken in the ratio, but taken at 100%. Okay. Now, a little note, because I just see this is a sort of minor point on the home office, but it's an important one. And I want you to get every dollar you're entitled to. So let's address it. Your internet and your phone are not the same as your other utilities. Okay. So I would not actually lump together your internet and phone expenses into the other utilities. Now, my gas, electricity, et cetera, is all going to be taken. I'm going to use that as my utilities, and I'm going to take that in the proportion of my studio. So if it's a 1/4 ratio, I'll take 1/4 of my utilities, generally speaking. But that isn't actually how you use phone and internet, right? When it comes to your business, you might use the internet like 80% for your business and 20% for personal, or your phone might be used 50% for business and 50% for personal, or some smaller percentage, right? I mean, you might, as a painter in my painting practice, I'm never on the phone. I mean, like virtually never, right? And occasionally I'll have a phone call with my gallerist as we're getting close to showtime, but that's like pretty rare, to be totally honest with you. On the other hand, in my tax practice, oh my God, I'm on my phone all the time. I have consults with clients every single day. So my phone is an enormous portion of my business expense when it comes to sunlight tax. So a phone goes separately from your utilities. I would list that on its own. And I would determine for that expense a reasonable conservative ratio of time that you spend using your phone on business versus on personal. Okay. If you have one cell phone, like I do, like many of us do, then there is no chance in the world that 100% of your phone expenses are deductible. And this is just a key for you in general when you're taking expenses for things that are used in a mixed way, both for business and personal. Never, ever, ever, ever take 100% of the expense for an item that clearly you have some personal use for. And if you only have one, you definitely have some personal use. And this is actually a classic way the IRS will catch you if you are overdoing it, right? So they are not merciful if they see that you do that. And I'm not merciful with my clients when I see them doing it. I'm just like, look, this is an obvious red flag. No, we're not going to do it. So not that we ever try to take unobvious red flags either, to be honest, but I'm just saying never take 100% of a mixed use item. That's just a rule that you can take with you. There's all kinds of things in your business that are going to be mixed use items. Like your computer is often mixed use. Camera equipment is often sometimes used for personal and sometimes used for photographing artwork, right? Your car is a classic example of something where you use it on the personal side to get your groceries, to pick up your kids, but then you also will go to client meetings in that same car. And just as a general principle of expenses, anytime you have one of those mixed use items, you're going to have a slightly different calculation method for taking that deduction. And the reason that calculation method is going to be different from just taking the full expense is because you're partly using it for personal, and the IRS is going to force you to remove the personal part of that expense before you deduct it. Okay. If you think about it, that is very fair. So internet, it is more art than science determining what percentage of your internet you use for your business versus for personal. I often will counsel clients in this way. I'll say, look, if you're like a videographer and you are uploading and downloading like massive video files all the time, and you have to get special internet with, better speed, upload and download speed because of those massive files, you're using a really heavy proportion of your internet for your business. So I would allow that client or encourage that client to take a higher ratio, maybe in the 80% zone, although I am literally just pulling a number out of my butt here. If in my painting practice, I might occasionally reference stuff on the internet as I'm on a painting project. I might look for an image, do a Google image search on occasion. But generally speaking, I am not using much internet at all in my painting practice. So to be honest, I don't think I usually even take any internet deduction at all on my painting Schedule C because it's just so tiny and so immaterial. Most of you, of course, are somewhere in between those two extremes. And so you might take, 20%, 40%, 60% of your internet. And that's really going to vary about how heavily you use the internet for your business. And you want to be really honest about how much you use the internet for personal time as well, right? I mean, are you watching Netflix? Are you ordering online groceries? I mean, you probably do use the internet. And so you don't want to be too, greedy about taking a bigger percentage of your internet as a tax deduction. All right, a couple other things about the home office before we wrap up. One, employees, just to remember, employees are not entitled to a home office deduction at all. And, that might just kind of suck for you. It just might be true. My family is a good example of this. Me and my husband both work from home. I work for myself. I am totally self-employed. So I have a big office and we deduct it. My husband has no deductible expense for his office. He's not allowed to have one because he's an employee. And so he just works wherever in the house. Sometimes he likes to work in a little nook in our bedroom. Sometimes he works at our dining room table. And that doesn't matter because we're not trying to prove any exclusive use for him because he doesn't get any office deduction at all. Subdividing a larger space. So I did already mention that you can subdivide a larger space when you take your home office deduction. I do want to address a very, very specific question from a listener, Nikki, hello, who writes in that she's living in a school bus. So how do I take my home office expense or home studio expense? Nikki, amazing. You are totally allowed to take a home office expense deduction, Nikki, and there's really no difference in any of these rules for you. Your living space is the full square footage of that school bus, and your home studio is going to be the portion of that bus that you use to make your paintings. Okay. So you're just going to take that exclusive use square footage and you're going to deduct that. That's all. Another listener had a question about mileage expenses when you have a home office. And yeah, I get that feels a little confusing. So let's talk about how you do mileage when you have a home studio. Well, actually, your mileage deduction is better when you have a home studio than when you have a studio or an office outside the home. Why is that? Because first of all, commutes are not deductible. Your commute is a personal expense and it is not something that counts as business mileage. So if you had an office outside of your home and you were just driving back and forth to it, you don't get to count that as deductible mileage, sorry to say. Now, what you do get to count as deductible mileage is going from your studio to another place of business. So if I go to my studio and then I go out to have lunch with my gallerist to talk about my upcoming show, or I go to this book tour event because I was just quite honored to be featured in a book of North Carolina artists. So if I go out to an event for that book tour, then that would be a deductible mileage for me. Now, the person who has the home studio, the cool thing there is pretty much every bit of mileage you do for your business is going to be deductible for you because there is no commute. Okay. So it's actually awesome when you have a home office, home studio. All of your business mileage is going to be deductible and you don't have to worry about tracking that commute that's not deductible. Okay. All right. One last thing I'm going to mention, which is the simplified method. So in 2013, the IRS allowed a brand new type of method. Of course, it's 10 years now, so it's not that new. But they allowed a new method for taking a home office deduction that has a lot lower requirement for record keeping and tracking square footage and all your utility bills. This is called the simplified method. So if you're in a situation where tracking all that paperwork and, the square footage of your entire space is too difficult, you can use the simplified method. And what that is you can simply take $5 per square foot of your space as a deduction. That caps out at 300 square feet. So you can't take a larger deduction than 300 square feet. But if that appeals to you, if you don't like all the record keeping of home offices, go for it. Use the simplified method. That is absolutely fine. I will tell you, as a practitioner, that I do the calculations both ways, and I will always take the bigger deduction for a client. And almost always the manual one is bigger. So for most of you, tracking your actual expenses is going to be worthwhile because it's just going to get you a bigger deduction. Honestly, if you're up for the admin, and I don't think it's that big of a deal, but maybe it feels like it is to you, and that's fine. I would just go ahead and track everything you need to know to take the home office deduction in the regular way. And if you want to then at tax time, do a little calculation to see if you get a bigger deduction with the simplified method using just $5 per square foot, no more than 300 square feet, go for it. Compare the two and take the bigger one. But I will preview for you that I'm pretty sure when you do that comparison, you're going to find what I have found, which is that probably doing it manually is going to be a bigger deduction for you. All right. I hope that has been a helpful, short and sweet, practical episode for you about the ins and outs of taking your home studio deduction. If you enjoyed this, or if you have a friend who has a home office, please share the episode. I would love and appreciate that so, so much. And if you have not downloaded my deductions guide yet with these home office rules on them, all written down for you, of course, that is a resource I give for free to everyone. And you are so welcome to download it right now by going to sunlighttax.com/deductions guide. I have 6 different versions. You can pick the one that fits you the best and print it out. It's 1 page. It's beautiful. And then just post it right above where you're going to do your bookkeeping or your taxes. All right. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. I'm so grateful that you have spent this time with me, and let a friend know if they could use this episode. I'm going to see you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. It really helps, and share it with a friend. I'm so grateful. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links we reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.